Capturing that special moment on film can come and go in the blink of an eye. Today's program will focus on two types of photographers on the set: the director of photography, setting the shots you see in movies, and the still photographer, quietly clicking the camera, getting those one-in-a-million shots. Join us as we expose the brilliance behind the lens. It all begins now on Below the Line.
It's Below the Line with George Peroulas. Tonight's guests are
Welcome to Below the Line. My first guest has been filming a wide range of projects for 20+ years. He has come here to explain the essentials of working behind the camera. Please welcome DP Bill Rahn. Hi Bill, welcome. Have a seat. Thanks for coming. How are you?
Doing good.
I know you're so super busy. You just finished the movie On the Market. You survive?
Yeah, I survived.
Tell us about that.
Well, it's a romantic comedy, and we had some really good shooting days. We did it really quick, but it worked out really well. A lot of good shooting days. Weather cooperated with us. It was good.
Good. I look forward to seeing that when it gets released. Now, tell us how all this began for you. You've been doing this 20+ years. How did this whole film, TV thing come for you?
Well, when my first daughter was born, I thought, I have got to have some way to shoot. So I started looking at the market, seeing what cameras. I'd never shot anything before in my life. So I went out and found what was available at the time, and that's really how I got started, just because I had a need in the very beginning. But actually getting into actually working and making money with it, probably 6-7 months down the road, I had a buddy of mine that was a photographer, and he was already in the wedding industry. And I just kind of mentioned to him, you know, you ought to think about maybe incorporating videos into your photography. And he said, you know what, he goes, now that you mention that, he said, we worked together on a job here a couple months ago. I said, we did? He goes, yes, it was a girl's wedding. He said, you do good work. I said, I do. So, you know, long story short on that was, you know, he really slingshot me into the wedding industry. And from that, I was able to continue on building my equipment on the side, you know, while I had a full-time job.
So you're doing the wedding videos, and how did you transition from that side job into a career?
Well, the wedding industry is really good for a young guy starting off type thing. It's really good to be in because you can have a full-time job and do that on the weekends. And when you get to the point where you're making more money in a day than you are in 5 days working in a job, you really have to look at it and say, I am wasting my time working in this job. There's other things I could be doing during the week in my own business rather than working a job. And when you get to that point, you know, it takes time to get to that point. It just doesn't just happen. And once you get to that point, then you're ready to make the transition into whatever that may be. I mean, maybe it's not photography or video, or maybe it's something else. But when you're able to do it in your own business, you can make more money than you can working in a job.
How has the industry changed over the years with cameras and lighting and technology, and how has that helped?
A lot. I mean, it's almost like a constant educational process. You have to keep reading the periodicals, you got to keep with the industry, you got to go to the different conventions. You just really have to study constantly. Even if you're not in school in college, even if you've graduated with a degree, you still have to keep up with the industry, and it just keeps changing and evolving and getting better. A lot of the guys today have opportunities to do different types of commercial work or even film work, shooting digital cinema, that they really could not have had the opportunity to do 6, 8, 9, 10 years ago, because the equipment was just so expensive and just almost unattainable. Now they've got some really decent equipment to shoot with that's very easily accessible. So it's the equipment has really gotten better really fast in the last 10 years.
Technology.
Oh man, it has.
And the price drops for production costs. And
which
all
is
that.
great for a guy starting off or a girl starting off that really does not have a whole lot of money to work with.
You're fortunate enough, and you have the business sense to buy your own equipment. And what's the advantage of having that when someone needs to hire a shooter?
There's two schools of thought with that. A lot of people won't have their own equipment. They say it changes too fast. I'm not in that school of thought. My school of thought, if I'm going to use something more than two or three times a year, I'm going to buy it. Because I had a buddy of mine tell me a long time ago, he who owns the most equipment makes the most money on a job. So it's always been my goal to own my own equipment. That way I can use as much as I want. I don't really have to worry about, oh, we got to get it back because we're renting it. But having your own equipment, to me, is a whole lot better than renting the stock. Like the film that we just finished shooting, that was all my own equipment. So I had a couple pieces of equipment that I borrowed from a couple different people that I don't usually use, but generally 95% of that equipment was my own. I like that a whole lot better. And
you obviously keep the upkeep on it,
yes,
and maintenance, and because it's your nickel.
And I know my equipment inside and out.
Now let's get into the bigger projects that you've done. Commercials, you've done TV stuff, and music videos, and of course films. Now explain the role of the director of photography, the DP. What is that job?
His primary thought process, I mean there's a long range of it, but generally the main thing is to work with the director. You've got to get inside the director's head and find out what are they wanting to see on this scene. And it's scene by scene by scene. You have to understand the entire picture, but you really have to understand what the director is trying to accomplish and extract that out of his head through what he says and what he shows you and what you talk about, and then be able to take that and transform that into the eye of the camera. And the eye of the camera then has to be able to see what the director is envisioning. Along that responsibility also is making sure the cameras are set up to certain angles are proper. Your color temperatures are correct. Using your lights to your best advantage. You can't just go into a scene and set up, boom, shot it next. It takes time to analyze what you've got and really, like I said, use your light to your best advantage, whether it's natural light or whether it's artificial light that you use in a studio type setup. So really that, and then also the DP also has to work with the electrical. Because I mean, if you're going to be setting up a lot of lights, then you've got to be able to have, your electrician has to know what your needs are. So really working with lights and your electrician and with the director, that's really encompasses a lot of what goes along with the director of photography's responsibility.
We'll have more coming up right after this. We're back with DP Bill Rahn. Now, Bill, what do you recommend to those who want to get into this line of work?
I would suggest get around the people who are doing what you want to do and learn from them. Because there's a lot to learn after you get out of college or out of a technical school. It's an ongoing learning process. It just doesn't stop. And you've got to have that hunger, you've got to have the desire to learn your field or learn multiple fields if you really like several different things. But, you know, financial-wise, if you're wanting to get into like being a director of photography, which a lot of times director of photography also is the camera operator. You do both. And a lot of getting started in the very beginning. I went almost 5 years of doing weddings on the side and never used that money for myself. I always put my money back into my equipment.
Sacrifice.
And nobody was telling me to do it. I just thought I need to build my equipment. I was focused on a goal. And the goal was to finally one day have a broadcast camera. That was my goal. It drove me 24 hours a day.